Okay, it's 11:05 for me.
All right, great. Everybody's in. So good morning, everybody. Good Saturday morning. My name is Pamia of Black Girls with Green Thumbs. I'm one of the co-founders of our organization. I'll let our other co-founder introduce herself also.
I'm Latiana, and as Camille said, we are the co-founders of Black Girls with Green Thumbs. And we are happy to have you all share your Saturday morning with us. This is one in a series of, I think about 6 this year that we'll be hosting once a month called Green Thumbs at Home. And with each of these classes, we will be covering either gardening or plant-based cooking. How we scheduled it is that we'll be doing gardening related topics during the summer and early fall months, and then we're going to transition into plant-based cooking once the fall and winter hits.
Yes. Like we said, we focus on urban gardening and community engagement. And the topic for our class today is urban wild foraging. And one of the reasons we really wanted to do this class because gardening is amazing, right? So you can learn a lot by gardening. You can learn a lot about your environment and about yourself. But foraging is one of those things that not a lot of people think about. And it's actually a way to not have to cultivate anything yourself. But if you know what you're looking for, you can find wild herbs and fruits and sometimes even vegetables in urban environments. So we thought it was a great idea to expose anyone who didn't really know a lot about this, like us a few years ago, because it's like one of the most amazing parts of being an urban gardener, in my opinion. So I guess we can just jump right into it if you're ready, La.
I am ready. Just making a note to everyone as people file in that we're recording this class. So if you would prefer not to be recorded, we are happy to send you a copy of the recorded lesson so you can still gather the information. I'm just going to make a note in the chat so as people come in, they are aware.
Yes, absolutely. So just to start everybody off, just a little bit about wild foraging and wild herbs and what they are. So wild herbs are plants that grow with little to no assistance from human beings, right? They grow naturally. A lot of them are very hardy and resilient. That basically means that they're able to survive certain conditions that other plants may not be able to survive. And again, this is without any human intervention, no planting, no cultivating, no pruning, nothing like that. They kind of just survive on their own, and they have their own life cycle that they go through. So wild herbs are edible. Many of them are highly nutritious, and they can supplement your diet on a day-to-day basis, but especially in a survival situation, right? So we'll be talking a little bit about that today. And if you know what to look for, these herbs can kind of be life-changing. So first things first, we're going to be discussing our first herb is the common dandelion, which is also known as dandelion leaf. And I'll let Latiana tell you guys a little bit about that.
So I was actually thinking about it, and I didn't learn that dandelion was considered to be a weed until I was an adult. Like growing up, I just thought that it was a beautiful flower that just grew. So most of you should be familiar with the dandelion. So although I thought that it was a beautiful flower, it is mostly known as an annoying weed, and yet dandelion is a nutrition powerhouse, and the entire plant is edible. And with most wild herbs or wild plants, you won't find that the entire plant is edible. So this is really unique. The roots, the leaves, and the flowers. You might want to, or you should eat the leaves of the dandelion when they're really young, because as with most vegetables, the older they get, the more bitter they are. If you do decide to eat the mature leaves, you want to boil them first, and that helps to remove the bitter taste. And for eating the roots, you want to boil the roots as well. You can drink that water, and you can even make tea. So dandelion has so many different uses, and it's really exciting to think that these plants that grow so plentifully can offer such great nutrition and can have so many different uses. And the flower, like if you're using the leaves as a salad, you can use that as a garnish, and you can even eat the flower as well for your dandelion salad. Camilla, you just switch locations.
I did. So while you were talking about dandelions, I kind of just wanted to show everybody that when it comes to urban foraging, we're not just making this up. Like, these are things that are legitimately usually right outside your house. So I'm actually right in front of my house right now. I'm on the front lawn. And although I don't have any dandelion flowers that are popped up right now because I had my landscaper come and mow my grass, all of them are gone. What I do have is the leaf itself. So I'll just show everyone an example of a young dandelion plant that doesn't have the flower growing from it just yet. So
I think the Wi-Fi gave out for me.
This is like see, you can kind of find this at the top, and then they're more jagged. I'm sorry?
Oh, no, we see you. Cleared up.
Can everybody see?
Yes.
Oops. Can everybody hear me? Okay, just wanted to make sure. So like I was saying, they're rounded at the top and kind of more jagged at the bottom. And again, this is an example of a very young dandelion leaf. I have another one over here, more over here. As you can see, they're popping up all over. And the dandelions are in like this family of kind of like bitter herbs and bitter leaves. And although they're bitter and they may not taste that great to us right off the rip, they're full of nutrition, like Latiana said. So a lot of bitter plants are really high in like magnesium and iron and calcium and things like that. So although we may not enjoy the bitterness of the taste, they're still really good for you. So these are plants that I add into smoothies sometimes. I might add them into juices when I'm using my juicer. And if you want to use them as greens, you can also like boil them and saute them as well. And that'll get rid of a little bit of that bitterness.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. For a lot of vegetables that most people are more familiar with, when you try to like sneak them into your diet, like a lot of people don't like kale, but I guess I'll put it in the smoothie because I need to get it. It's a powerhouse. It's one of those superfoods. So you can think about dandelion in that way.
Yes, exactly. And it's so funny. I was actually watching Chopped not too long ago, the TV show. And one of the ingredients that they had on Chopped was dandelion leaf. And so a lot of the chefs weren't like familiar with how bitter it was. And they were fish, and the chefs were like, oh God, this is like extremely bitter. You guys have to taste things, before before you serve them to us. So, if you guys decide to use dandelion leaf in recipes, just consider that's a little bitter. So you might want to cook it a little bit longer, or before you saute it, like we said, boil it just a tad. So moving on from the common dandelion leaf, I would like to talk to you guys about wild strawberry. So wild strawberry is not an herb. This would be considered urban foraging for fruit. And wild strawberries are very, very common to our area. Latiana and I live in the Pennsylvania area, Philadelphia/Delaware County. And usually you can find this growing in open fields because it usually needs like a lot of space. But I actually have it in my backyard as opposed to my front yard because it gets a lot less like traffic and it grows really well back there. I was kind of surprised to know that like many people don't consider it anything but a weed when it's like, this is like a whole fruit. It's like mind blowing. So many people will, cut over it or try to pull it back. And that makes sense when it comes to having garden space. But if you have space that you're not using necessarily, and this is growing, is the perfect way to kind of be able to have some wild grown fruit. So a little bit more about it. They're usually smaller than the strawberries that you'll find in the store. So I would say, strawberries that you find in the store can be up to this big. Wild strawberries are going to be really small. But that doesn't mean that they're less tasty, right? So if you rinse them off and taste them, like they're really amazing. They're very sweet and they have kind of like this light, sweet flavor that's really nice. And they're usually a treat for non-humans. So birds eat them a lot, some bugs. So they're just good to have if you want to be a person who's like, contributing to, your environment and letting birds have some free food in your backyard. So like I said, these plants are edible. They're very tasty. There's nothing that you can kind of confuse them with that's going to be dangerous, but there is a plant called Indian mock strawberry. Again, it's not dangerous. Like, you can still eat it, but it doesn't have that sweetness that a regular wild strawberry has. So they usually grow in like these neat little clumps, and it kind of makes them a really good choice if you just want some ground cover, even if you don't plan to use them. It is a beautiful plant when it comes to how the leaves look, as you can see in the picture, as well as the fruit itself. And like I said, it brings bees and birds to your garden area, which, as we know, are can be pollinators. So
yeah, growing up, like I have a vague memory of hearing like, oh, those strawberries, like those are poisonous. You hear so much about things being poisonous that are actually like edible to us.
yeah, so let's dispel that. They're not. Well, poisonous at all. And again, like, if you know what a strawberry looks like, there are like other wild berries that are poisonous, but it's really hard to mistake them, right? So those other berries have a completely different like structure. They don't look anything like strawberries, so it would be a lot harder to mistake them for. Like we said, the only other thing that looks like them is this Indian mock strawberry, which again is not hazardous to your health. It's just not sweet. Is not something that you would really enjoy the taste of. So again, they're not poisonous. They're full of potassium. They help with liver health. They support gut health, as well as heart health. So if you have them, rinse them off and eat up.
And I thought that it was good that you mentioned about how they attract pollinators to your garden, because if we are gardeners, we need to think about how when we introduce a garden to our home, or if you're gardening in a community garden, like we're creating new ecosystems that might not necessarily be there, and it's beneficial to the health of all of the insects, birds, rodents, people that exist within that ecosystem. So, keep the strawberries around. If possible, if you're not going to eat them for others. So the next popular, and I'm going to call it popular because you see this pretty frequently in your area, I'm sure. Wild herb is plantain, and that's not to be confused with the banana-like fruit plantain. You might pronounce it a little different, but this is plantain. And it has been used for thousands of years by people as food. And so we got a good look at that. And if you feel like that we need to show it again, like if you're a little unfamiliar with it, I can put it back up. But it's been used by thousands of years by people as food. And it's a remedy for all sorts of illnesses. You can usually find plantain in wet areas like marshes and bogs, but they'll also sprout up in urban areas, because I have plenty in front of my house. When I walk the dog, I see plenty of plantain. So it's as Camilla described, like all of these that we're going over, it's very resilient. So if I would describe the leaves there, and I'm gonna bring it back up so you can see it as I'm describing it. Plantain has oval short stem leaves, and they tend to hug the ground. So you'll see them in clusters, and the leaves may grow to be about 6 inches long and about 4 inches wide. And you'll also notice those tall, like grass-like structures in plantain that'll also help you to identify it. And it's best to eat the leaves when they're young. So this is the theme you'll see here, like with these plants that if you're going to eat the leaves, or if the leaves are edible, eating them while they're young will help to eliminate that bitter taste. Plantain is very high in vitamin A and calcium, and it also provides some vitamin C.
Yeah, so this was one of those plants that I was like, oh, you can eat these? Like, like I would have never thought, and when I actually, I have this app on my phone called Plant Snap. And if you guys never heard of it, it's a really good app to download. If I'm not mistaken, they have like a free version and then a paid version that has like some bells and whistles. But in the beginning, when I was starting to get into identifying these wild herbs, and I looked it up and I saw the name, I was like, plantain. I was like, okay, that can't be right, because plantain looks like it's not that. But yes, they just, both plants just share this name, even though they're so vastly different. But like Latiana was saying, it kind of grows all over the world. It's not just native to Pennsylvania or the United States. And it's just I always just get excited for the simple fact that you can literally go outside and find highly nutritious things to eat that you don't have to pay for. I'm all about free things and using what you have available to you. So like we said, if you have this on your lawn, or if you have this in your backyard, or even if you have space in your neighborhood where you find these, this is a really good plant to forage for. And again, it's called plantain leaf or plantain leaf, however you like to pronounce it.
And we will spend some more time talking about like where to actually forage in your area, because you are hearing us say like in an urban area, but there are some places that you don't necessarily want to pick food from.
Yes, exactly. So our next wild herb that we're going to talk about is purslane, and it is Latiana smiling because she knows this is again one of my very, very favorites. So it's actually a wild herb and a succulent. Latiana is going to pull up a picture of it for you right now. This one was a picture I took. It was actually just growing out of a crack in the sidewalk in one of the schools I used to work at last year. And this one was so beautiful that I had to take a picture of it. It was doing so well. So as you can see, like the leaves they look like succulents, they have like that kind of like bubbly look, and like they're full of water. And so many people just consider them to be obnoxious weeds, especially in the United States. But they provide much needed vitamins and minerals on a daily basis, as well as in a wilderness or a survival situation. One cool thing about them is Gandhi used to talk about these plants all the time. So Gandhi was like obsessed with purslane for some reason. He used to, forage for it and eat it all the time. He named it one of his like top 10 like favorite foods. And you got to remember, this was a man who fasted for long periods of time. And once he was done fasting, he made sure he ate very nutritious foods. So just something to think about. And when it comes to the taste, I love the taste of them. They're kind of like refreshing. So they're full of a lot of water, and they have this like kind of sweet/sour taste to them. One thing to consider when it comes to purslane is that like there's two different types, and sometimes they do grow together. So Latiana, if you can pull that picture back up one more time. If you guys look at this plant, you will not see any red dots in the center of the leaves at all. If you do come across this plant and you see red dots in the center of the leaf, that is the type that is toxic, right? So you do not want to eat that type at all. You want to make sure that the leaves don't have any red dots. And if they do have red dots, you'll see them. They're not, hard to find. You will definitely be able to visually see them. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. When it comes to actually eating them, they can be rinsed off well and eaten raw, which is like my preferred method. If you're not into like eating raw plants, or if you have like some kind of stomach or gastric issues, these also can be softly boiled or sauteed as well. I've never tried that because I just have such a fun time eating them, just, popping them in, or putting them in a blender with a smoothie or something like that. But if you want to prepare it for dinner or something like that, they can be sauteed, with other vegetables. I would probably try it with onions. I'm sure they'd be good.
And it's purslane. So everyone, we are going to actually share a recipe for one of the plants that we're discussing today at the end of the course or end of the class. And it's purslane. Is that the recipe, the plant that we're featuring in our recipe?
No, the recipe is for the purple dead nettle.
Okay. All right. So the next pretty popular plant that we are going to discuss that's in our area is mugwort. That name just cracks me up.
I know. It's like something from Harry Potter.
That's exactly what it sounds like to me. So mugwort has a very long and interesting history as food and medicine. Throughout the years, mugwort beer has been a favorite in many cultures, and that's before hops have gotten really popular to use for beer. This edible plant can be confused with wormwood, which is another herb. An examination of the leaves is how to tell the difference between both of those plants. Mugwort leaves are green at the top and white underneath. And if you see in this photo, the larger background photo, you can look at Pamia's hand, because this is Pamia's hand in the corner, and you'll see how green those leaves are. And in the box, we are showing the underside of it, and it's white underneath, or it has a white hue. And they have pointed tips and purplish stems, while wormwood leaves has a silvery bottom, silvery top and bottom, and the flowers are more showy. Mugwort leaves are aromatic and, again, slightly bitter, and can be eaten raw or cooked. Young spring shoots can be cooked. The leaves, flowers, and roots can be used as a tea. Mugwort is commonly used, as I said, as a flavoring in beer. And Pamia actually has some mugwort growing in front of her house as well.
I do. So like Latiana said, she talked about like the young, and someone is actually mowing their grass out here. So sorry if you guys can't hear me really well. But so I just want to show you guys some of the very young shoots that I have growing in my front yard right now. Again, this is the mugwort. These are very young plants. If you flip them over, again, you can see that really beautiful silvery side on the other side. That's one of the ways that you can identify this plant. And as you guys can see, like it kind of grows wild on my lawn all over the place. I've actually used it for tea and tonic in the past, and it works out really well when you boil them. And the taste, it doesn't really have like a bitter taste, but it can kind of taste a little bit soapy. Like some people think that cilantro tastes a little soapy, but you can, if you don't like that aspect of it, you can always add like a little honey or add some lime or some ginger to offset that. Some people take mugwort root as a tonic. So this is another plant that you can use, not just the leaves and the stems, but the root as well. And that tonic is really good for boosting energy. Again, many of these herbs are very high in magnesium and iron. So one thing to consider is that in America, most of us, eating the standard American diet, we really don't get a lot of iron and magnesium like we should, and it causes a lot of health issues. So some of these plants that you can forage for in an urban environment will give you very high amounts of those things. Another thing to consider is that some people take the rest of the plant for stomach and different conditions with your intestines, including colic, diarrhea, constipation, cramps, digestion, even worm infestations. So mugwort is one of those herbs that it has some chemical components in it that are excellent for expelling parasites out of your system. So when it comes to mugwort, and we'll talk about this a little bit more at the end of the class, this is one of those herbs that you want to make sure that you're not over consuming, just because it can be a little bit harsh on your stomach if you already have some issues going on. And you don't.
And that's a good point that you bring up, because we talked about it in one of our previous classes, just thinking about the distinction between vegetables and herbs, and it really is the quantity that you can consume safely, and it doesn't like cause an adverse effect on our body. Like while they can both have like a whole lot of nutrition and like vitamins and minerals and all sorts of great health implications, you don't eat them the same way because of how they can impact your body.
Exactly. One good way to think about what Latiana just mentioned is that you might boil a whole giant pot of spinach and be able to eat it with no problems, right? If you did that same thing with the same amount of basil or cilantro or parsley or something like that, you may have an upset stomach or, like vomit, because the herbs are much higher in certain chemical components, your basic vegetables and plants are. So when it comes to how you consume those things, the rule of thumb is usually like, vegetables about like this much and herbs about this much. So.
That's why we use them. That's why people typically use them to season. We're just gonna sprinkle it on top.
And that's flavor and the flavor components too. Like, yes. Herbs, like the flavor is so intense with herbs and not as much when it comes to vegetables.
And as I was thinking about it, as you're showing the mugwort in front of your house, I have a lot of mugwort in the front of my home as well. And part of me thinks that like years ago, I had planted some plants that were identified as like helping like a rain, they were part of a rainwater garden. And I remember taking these plants and they were like, are you sure? Because they're going to grow. And mugwort was one of those plants and it grows.
Like with no assistance. Like you have
Yeah.
to pay no attention to it whatsoever. And you can like, I put pots on top of them. Like as soon as I off, it rains, and 3 days later they're back up. So again, hardy, resilient. These are things you don't really have to worry about messing up your home. So moving on from the mugwort, we're going to be discussing our next herb, which is purple dead nettle. It's also known as red dead nettle, and it has a couple other like well. But purple dead nettle is one of those plants that, as you see in the picture, when you see a picture of it, you kind of like immediately recognize it. Like, oh, I've definitely seen that before. Maybe I just didn't know what it was called. And that's how I was with plantain. I had seen it my entire childhood, and up until I was almost like 30 years old, I didn't have any idea of what it actually was. So I was kind of just happy to discover its benefits upon looking it up. And usually it grows in like these huge patches, which can be annoying if that patch happens to be your garden. But the good thing about it is that it makes collecting it and harvesting it a lot easier. It's very easy to identify. Lav, you could bring the picture up one more time. The tops are usually like pink, purple, red, or a blend of all three of those colors. And purple dead nettle is actually in the mint family. So like all mint family plants, it kind of has like these fuzzy leaves and a squarish type stem. And these are usually low growing, but they can reach up to 8 to 10 inches tall. So one of the good things about identifying this plant is it really doesn't have any toxic lookalikes at all. So this is not a plant you have to worry about like misidentifying and getting sick. It is sometimes confused for a plant called henbit, which is closely related. It's also another edible herb / weed. I personally have like a lot of it growing in my front yard, in the backyard, usually, especially in the spring, summer, and fall. But I see it everywhere when I'm out on walks. If you guys start to take walks in, the areas where you live and you keep your eyes open, 9 times out of 10, you'll probably find some as well. But again, it's edible and it's medicinal. I hate the fact that sometimes it's called dead nettle because it kind of makes it sound like something that you wouldn't want to eat. But who knows how they come up with these names for plants. I don't know why it's called that.
Because what I noticed a few years ago in my neighborhood, the purple dead nettle has sprouted up on everyone's lawns, like just all of a sudden. And like, not even just in my immediate, like 3 blocks or so, but all over Delaware County. I said, where did this plant come from?
Yes. So this is one of the herbs that we are going to be providing a recipe for. I was really excited to find this recipe because when I initially tasted it, I said, oh my goodness, this is so sweet. I'm sure you can make a lot, from this. So again, it's not only a wild edible green, but it is another nutritional kind of like powerhouse. Again, magnesium and iron. This is going to be a theme that I'm talking about a lot just because it's something that so many of us are lacking, especially in Black and brown communities. I've even had my own struggles with, having low iron and being anemic and things like that. And so again, this is an opportunity for us to use what we have around us, especially natural options, to get these nutrients in our system. So if you guys come across this, especially Black women of color, we're notorious for having low iron. This is something that can help you correct that issue.
So this is the next herb we're going to talk about. Now, I know we've all seen this. This is clover, and clover is actually edible. So white clover, and let me be particular, white clover is actually edible. And they're found everywhere in open grassy areas. You can spot them by their distinct trefoil leaves. So let me zoom in on these leaves. So you have definitely seen these leaves, and you can eat clovers raw, but they taste better boiled. Actually, I was reading an article not too long ago about how, let's say decades ago, white clover was marketed as like a good, like long, not long cover, like instead of grass, people were really using white clover. But with the change in, or should I say, with the push for grasses and grass seeds and manicured lawns, like clover has then changed to be considered a weed. But decades ago, clover seeds were sold plentifully for people to be growing in front of their homes. Because again, if you think about it, they're flowers, they're herbs. They help to attract the things that we need to make the food that we need to keep us healthy grow. But back to clover in particular, rather than just them serving as a pollinator. If you do decide to cook them, you will need a large amount of clover, and they will wilt similar to spinach. Because you know how disappointing that could be. You have a huge bowl, a huge bag of spinach, and then at the end of it, it's like a cup. So clover is very much like that. So you'll want to collect a lot of clover. Yet but it's better for you if you eat it raw, because you won't be cooking out like all the nutrients.
Yes. One thing I wanted to add was that the flower heads themselves in Native American communities have been used as a blood cleanser, and also a way to clean any open wound that you might have. They've also been, the flower heads can also be boiled down, and when that mixture is cooled, it can be used as an eye wash if you have something in your eye, or if you have reoccurring eye issues. You can also use any part of the plant as tea. That tea can be used for colds, coughs, fevers, mostly, any kind of like expectorant, if you need to get rid of colds. And Delaware Indians were one of the people who discovered how you can use this plant to be able to do this.
And isn't there another color clover that we actually shouldn't be eating?
Bacon, it's the red, but I haven't found any of that in our area.
Right.
I don't think that it's native. And if it is not in the northeast section of the United States.
Okay.
So far, just to give a brief overview, we have gone over dandelion leaf, we've gone over wild strawberry, we've gone over plantain leaf, again, not to be confused with the banana-like plant, as well as purslane, mugwort, purple dead nettle, and clover. So one of the things we kind of touched on a little bit, but I definitely want to talk about again, is why it's a good idea to familiarize ourselves with foraging, right? So we've already brought up the fact that it's a really good idea to do it just because it's free food, right? So everybody loves something free. Again, these wild herbs are edible, they're highly nutritious, and they can supplement your diet. And especially if you guys are like me and Latiana, if you like to go camping a lot, or if you enjoy the outdoors, we always talk about safety and knowing in an emergency situation what you can eat in an outdoor environment and what you can't. So if you start to familiarize yourself visually with these things in your neighborhood or in communities where you decide to camp or farm or take walks, it won't take long to kind of start to notice what's in your area and what you can eat and what you can't. And again, knowing how to identify these wild plants is just a valuable skill to have, even if you never ever need it. And this information should and can be passed down from generation to generation. So again, many of these herbs that we're talking about in the United States, specifically like the Philadelphia area, we're really lucky to have had the Native Americans that, tested these things out and, could relay information about what was good to eat and what wasn't. So we need to use that information to better our health while we can.
Yeah, because unfortunately, we are so disconnected from the land. And this is in our knowledge of the plants that grow, specifically those that grow natively, really contributes to our relationship with the environment, our relationship with the land in particular. like just walking, I feel like that it can really increase your sense of like pride in the environment and stewardship over the environment. If you start to recognize and understand like what these plants are, like what the plants are and what their uses are in the areas in which you live. So if for nothing else, maybe you won't be maybe you have no intent to try to taste it or cook it or anything, but just having that knowledge for yourself and to share with your family, that really does increase your and really like strengthen your relationship with the world around you. So as we keep saying, like the ones that we are sharing today, these herbs and fruits and flowers, like they are very common in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, so greater Philadelphia area, and typically like really the Northeast. And these wild herbs can be found almost anywhere in the outdoor environment in our region. I've seen dandelion growing out the cracks of buildings and mugwort growing on rooftops. Like these wild herbs are very resilient, and even like that purslane in one of the gardens that we manage over at a library in Delaware County, we went to weed the garden and the purslane grew so huge. If you follow us on Instagram, you'll see a photo of Hamia and I with some purslane that just was growing in the garden. And we were just so impressed how large it grew because I hadn't seen it grown so big before. And that's probably because many of us tear the weed out because we look at it, it's not supposed to be here. Let's get rid of it. So we actually allowed it to stay in our garden because we want to use it. And I'm just so curious with how big can it get? How are we going to use this in the garden? And you also use it as a teaching tool. So it was very timely that as we went to go maintain that garden that we saw this multiple huge plants of purslane that we've never seen like grow that large before. And we do see your questions in the chat. We are not ignoring you. We're going to get back to those at the end, but we do see your questions in the chat. Everybody, if you have questions, keep sending them through. We can't hear you, Pamela.
Sorry, I must have actually muted myself. I apologize. So we keep talking about, how resilient wild herbs are. So if you guys just remain consistent and be on the lookout for them, you'll be surprised where you can find them. Like, so literally when I was just outside my house, it's embarrassing to talk about, but I really need pointing done, like on my bricks, like really bad. But I literally see like weeds and, wild herbs growing out of the side of my house. So you might find them on rooftops, like in the grass area, in your garden area. If you're on the lookout, you might be able to find them in some really interesting places. So we also talked about when it comes to foraging, making sure we're foraging in areas that are safe, right? So when it comes to just being outside of your house, one thing that I've always considered is that, like on curbside, we're living in Philadelphia, PA, right? So a lot of us have like, grass and, different wild herbs and weeds that are growing out of the curb. And it can seem like kind of like the perfect place to pull from, but there's some considerations that you want to think about before you do that. So I live on a block that everyone has a dog, right? So obviously people are walking up and down the block and, they're using the curb as a bathroom and things like that. So you always want to consider that you never want to harvest wild herbs from areas that have a high foot traffic from humans or animals because they may be contaminated with waste, right? Even if there's no animals on your block or in your neighborhood, you have to consider that sometimes, people put their trash out on their curb. There's a lot of ways that those areas can be contaminated. So we wouldn't suggest that you harvest from areas that are like that. Some other areas that you want to consider are areas that have been treated with pesticides or herbicides. So I'm not a big fan of them for many reasons at all. For my personal space around my house, long-term use of them, we still don't really know a whole lot about, but we do know for sure that they are toxic to humans, right? So if you get your lawn treated, or even your neighbor gets their lawn treated, wind and water and rain can kind of spread these chemicals around. So that's something else that you definitely want to consider anywhere that you're pulling wild herbs from. Another consideration are vehicle traffic, right? So if you're in an area where people park their cars a lot here, or they idle their vehicles in a certain area, those exhaust fumes can also, damage the plants to the point where they become toxic as well, over long periods of time. So these are just some general rules of thumb to consider in urban areas. I'm sure there's some others that you guys may be able to think about as well. But these are things that are very important to consider anytime you're eating something that you didn't grow yourself.
Yeah, because we want to think about the environment in which these plants grow. And that's even a larger consideration when we're thinking about our global food system, like how are the foods grown or cared for that we eat. But that's not what the topic of this class is. But so for the wild herbs, you do, and when you're thinking about foraging, you want to be very specific about where it is that you might be foraging your food from, or the wild herbs. So that's the environmental considerations. But then, like, how do you familiarize yourself with identifying the herbs? We did show you some pictures, but it really takes time. As you keep hearing us say, like, when you're going out on your walks, like, look around you, see if you can identify some of those plants. And the more you observe, the better you will be at identifying these wild herbs with confidence. Like, so you want to be taking the time and be intentional about your observation. And there are so many resources online and in your local libraries that you can research and do more reading on these wild herbs. And we just named a few that are really prominent in our area. And there are so many more that you might not even recognize that like off the top of your head, like, you may have seen some of these photos, like, oh, I've seen that before, but there are so many more in our area that are native. And that information is available to you, like, pretty easily if you check online or visit your local libraries.
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to plants to avoid, we felt like this was a very important topic to bring up. And we want to be very clear. If you are not 100% able to identify something, do not consume it. Okay, don't consume it until you feel confident in what you're doing, right? So you don't know if something's poisonous, and it's just better to be safe than sorry. So never ever eat a plant that you're not totally sure that you can identify. But there's some markers when it comes to plants that are in the wild that can kind of tell you right off the bat that this is not something that you should be eating or consuming. And some of those things are a milky or discolored sap from any part of the plant. Spines, fine hairs, or thorns. Those are kind of nature's way of telling humans and animals, stay away from this plant. Beans, bulbs, or seeds inside the pods of a plant. Another one is a bitter or soapy taste. Dill, carrot, or parsnip like foliage. So what that means is kind of like, if you guys think about, how the top of a carrot grows, if you come across a herb or a plant that has that type of foliage, that may be something that you want to stay away from. Another one is an almond scent in the woody stem part of a plant. If it kind of has an almond scent to it, that's a clear indicator that you may have a poisonous plant in front of you. Two other things are grain heads that have pink, purple, or black spurs on them. So I'm trying to think of a good example of that. There's a lot of trees that have those. You don't see it as common with plants in this area.
Would you consider that planting the like grass-like thing to be like a grain head?
That's more of like something you would find in like a marsh or like a bog.
Okay.
Yeah, it does look similar to a green head. So yeah. Yes.
Okay. Or if we can think of like the top of like how corn looks when it's growing like really tall, like those grain heads.
Yes, that's exactly what you want to be looking for.
And I brought up as you mentioned, like how the foliage looks on carrots. So like this type of look.
Yes.
You just want to exercise some caution.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you heard Camilla say like whether that like if it has beans, bulbs, or seeds inside the pods. That's why like being able to identify visually and knowing what you're seeking is important, because obviously we eat beans, we eat potted vegetables with pods. But like, if you are unsure, like that's something that kind of is like a red flag if you're unsure whether we should be eating it or not.
Exactly. So many toxic plants can like exhibit one or even many of the things that we just described. But you have to bear in mind that some of the plants that we've already discussed have some of those attributes, right? So this is why it's just important to kind of familiarize yourselves with them, because some plants that have these attributes can still be edible. So the characteristics that we talked about are kind of just guidelines, you know, just to get you guys started off, to get you confident over time to kind of know what you're dealing with. But if you want to be completely sure that an unknown plant is edible, and you have a day or two to spare, like if you're, you know, going hiking, or if you're camping, you can always perform something called the universal edibility test. I always want to say eligibility test, right? But yes, it's called the universal edibility test. So Live, you can bring up the visual that we have for that. We're going to talk a little bit about it. I still want to have time to go through questions with you guys. But I just want to bring up this visual because we'll go through some of the things you can do to figure out if you are able to eat something or not. And again, this is especially good to consider in a survival situation, or if you're just an adventurous person who's, you know, like I said, into camping and the outdoors. So one of the first things that you want to do to find out if an unknown plant is going to be good to eat in an emergency situation is to separate the parts of that plant. So if you come to any of our classes or, you know, any of our other like online seminars, we always talk about the different parts of plants, and there's basically 5 parts. That's the leaves, the roots, the stems, and the buds/flowers. So if you're thinking about eating a plant, you kind of want to separate all of those parts, and you're going to go through these different tests for each part of that plant. So a good example of why you would want to do that is because you can take a tomato plant, for example, right? And we all know that we can eat the fruit of a tomato plant because tomatoes are amazing, but the stems and the leaves are not edible, and neither are the roots. So that's a good example of a plant that you can eat certain parts of it, but not others. So the second thing you want to do is do a contact test. So a rule of thumb is if something is not good for your skin, it's generally not good for the outside of your body. And even dermatologists will tell you this when it comes to different allergies, like a person might have a peanut allergy or a strawberry allergy or something like that. And the way that they usually know is usually when it comes into contact with their skin, right? So that's something to consider. The third one is cooking. So some plants that are toxic actually become edible after you cook them or boil them. So the goal is to kind of test it to see how you would eat it. So if you don't have any means to boil the plant, you can test it raw. But once you've boiled it, if you know you're going raw, you want to take the plants apart and kind of like hold it up to your lip for a few minutes. And if you feel any kind of like tingling or a burning sensation, you'll know at that point, without ingesting it, obviously, that this is a plant that you do not want to eat. Number 4 is taste. And if you pop that same part of the plant into your mouth and kind of hold it into your tongue for about 15 minutes, this will give you a much better indication if it's going to be something that you can ingest and not be toxic. So if you experience anything unpleasant while you're doing that, you want to spit that out immediately and kind of rinse your mouth out with water. Number 5 is the chew test. So if you've gone through separate, contact, cook, and taste, you can move on to chew. So after you've held that piece of the plant in your mouth for that 15 minutes, you can actually go on to see if you have no adverse reaction. Obviously, you can chew it thoroughly and hold it in your mouth for another 15 minutes. Again, this is time consuming, but it's better to be safe than sorry. You don't want to swallow at this point. But once again, if you feel any discomfort, any kind of tingling or burning or anything like that, you want to go ahead, spit it out, rinse your mouth out very well with water again. Number 6 would be swallow. So if you make it through step 5, you're going to have a pretty gross, soggy piece of plant in your mouth by this point. But at the end of that 15 minutes, you'll need to swallow it. Now comes more waiting. So you don't want to eat anything for 8 hours because you want to truly see how what you just ate is going to, assimilate into your body. You can drink water, but no more of the plant or no more of any other kind of food. If you feel nauseous or if you feel like you need to vomit or, induce vomiting or drink a lot of water, this is not something that you want to eat. But if you feel fine during the 8-hour waiting period, you then can proceed to the next step. So the very last step is chow, right? So that means you're going to get down to chowing down a little bit. So you're going to gather about a 1/4 cup of that same exact part of the plant that you tested, and you want to prepare it the same way you did in step 3. So that means you can eat the plant, wait another 8 hours. If you feel sick at all, you kind of want to follow the same step as above, rinse your mouth out, spit it out. And you don't want to drink any water during that time. So we're going to provide you guys with a copy of this test so that you can have it in your arsenal. And again, this is for the more adventurous of our followers, for people that are kind of into the things like camping and hiking and things like that. And this is really good to use, like I said, in a survival situation where you have no other recourse, but you need to eat to survive.
Yes. Because as we were like reviewing the universal edibility test, I said, oh, this takes a long time. I'm like 15 minutes. But if you are trying to fight for your life, that's not that long.
Right. Exactly. And it is worth the wait. Again, if you guys have ever gotten food poisoning or had an allergic reaction, how serious it can be. So if you look at the entire scope of the edibility test, you'll see that, if you go through all those steps the way you're supposed to, it can take about 24 hours, to truly know if something can be edible or not. But we just wanted to give you guys this information because you never know.
And this edibility test originated in the military. So we're really thinking about preparing you in these in survival situations. So it's good information to have should you ever need it. So we're going to hop into the questions, and then also we're going to be wrapping up over the next few minutes after we answer some questions. But don't log off too quickly because we have a couple of things some housekeeping things that we want to go over before we close out the class. So one of the first questions that we received that we didn't talk about was, do you have any suggested sites or locations to buy the herb seeds? So there are 2 farms or 2 places that come to mind when I'm thinking about they specialize in native seeds. One I know the name of, the other one I know it's in New Jersey, so I could share that. So one is called True Love Seeds, and it's based out of the Sankofa Community Farm in down in Bartram's Garden in Southwest Philly. So I'm not certain if they have seeds for these plants that we have reviewed, but one of the things they specialize in are both culturally, historically relevant seeds and native seeds to our area. And then there's this other farm that I know or another place in New Jersey, and they have tons of different seeds, herb seeds, and flower seeds that are native to our region. So I made a note to share that with you all once I go in my notes and find both of those locations, and I can provide the websites.
So one of the other questions that I see next, do you have any suggestions for books or websites that would help? So I actually do. One book that I have here that I wanted to show everybody, this is called The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. I actually ordered this a couple months ago. The authors are Nicole Appelian and a man called Claude Davis. I really like this as a resource because it has visuals in it, just like we did with you guys today, that shows all of the backyard herbs that you may be able to find, as well as so many medicinal uses for them, right? So there's food-based recipes, there's recipes for tinctures and tonics, there's recipes for salves for your skin, there's recipes for even make, like I mentioned, tinctures like as well that you can make with you know, grain alcohol or what have you. This book is a really good resource. I'll just show you, you know, what it looks like in the inside. And it was moderately priced. I think I might have paid like $35 for it.
Yeah, I think that's how much it is, like 35.
Yeah.
And I have another book, I think it's called, I mean, what is it, like the Encyclopedia of Herbs or something, that resource that I got from my grandmother. So I'll share that. So that'll be another resource that we'll share after this. So I'll include the name and author of this book and then the name and author of the like encyclopedia that I have. And that too has different, because I think it's spices and herbs this one covers, but it has the many different uses for different spices and herbs.
Yes, and as far as websites, there is a blog called Southern Forager that I actually got the recipe from that we're going to share with you guys for that purple dead nettle soup. It's tried and tested. I actually made it on my own and it's absolutely delicious. So if you want to check that website / blog, it's called Southern Forager. And if you Google it, it'll come right up.
Okay, and we went over the like how to avoid, like where to look for and forage different plants to you know, that may have been sprayed with pesticides or herbicides. So I think that, does anyone have any last questions? And if you want to be unmuted, we are happy to talk to you all. So let me see if I can unmute everybody. Y'all can say hello.
Actually, just sent 2 messages to Pamia.
Okay, let me. All right, let me go back to the messages. Let's go to the chat. Also, the nettle pick you showed us is one of the varieties called red. Yes. So purple nettle, purple dead nettle, and red nettle are all folk names for the same plant.
Oh, okay. It's just one variety. It's just nettle.
Yes, yes. And I mean, there are types of nettle, but this purple / red is the one that we're talking about today. Some of the other nettle plants, like you have a plant called stinging nettle. There's like maybe 20 different types of nettle plants. So that stinging nettle one that's edible, but you wouldn't get it confused with the purple dead nettle because it doesn't have those beautiful flowers. Like
only the one you showed me is showed us is the one edible.
Yes, correct.
And I'll bring that back up just because we were talking about it.
Sorry, did you say something like the nettle has the rich iron for women?
Yes, that is also very high in iron and magnesium. So again, like there's many women across all, you know, like races and different backgrounds that struggle with iron consumption. But one of the combat this is by eating raw vegetables and raw fruits, specifically these wild herbs. They're very, very high in iron and magnesium.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that. And also the other last question is the strawberry, white strawberry. Do you have any pictures?
Yes. So can we bring up that picture that we had of the wild strawberry, Latiana, really quickly so that
just curious to. Oh, okay. Oh, wow, it looks good.
Yes, it's really pretty. So it has those like cute little leaves, and sometimes you'll see those leaves without seeing the strawberries pop up yet, but they usually come out in the summertime.
Oh, I see. Is this only particularly to this region? Because I actually went to strawberry farm. I picked strawberry, but it's farmed. You know, it's the normal one. They send it to the supermarket. So,
right.
I think it's different. Yeah.
So I know that strawberries and wild strawberries can be grown all over as long as the temperature, you know, is in the right condition. But as far as wild strawberries, like I have family from South Carolina, like I've seen them growing all over there. So I know specifically like in the southern part of the United States, as well as like the Northeast, you'll find them wild like that. I am not certain when it comes to like central or west, but I could find out for you.
Thank you.
What part of the country are you in?
In Missouri, in the middle. I didn't see it.
Yeah, you have a participant from Missouri. Awesome. Let's see, where do they grow?
And we just had a little note that stinging nettle is also edible. You just need to wear gloves to harvest it, and it needs to be steamed to deactivate the stingers. And that relates to what what we're saying, that sometimes things need to be cooked in order for it to be edible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so I just looked it up, and they're saying that wild strawberries can grow all throughout the northern hemisphere. So they grow all over, in particular from April to June every year.
Okay,
so if you all notice, and I'll put it back in the chat box. I'm just going to ask if you can take some time today, or within the next few days, and complete this survey. So I shared the link there, but I'll share it again when we're sharing those other resources, so like the universal editability test and some of the books and websites that you all asked us about. But please take some time and complete this survey for us. And I'm going to share a couple of screens before we end it out. So today's program is funded through an award from the National Network of Libraries of Medicine Mid-Atlantic region, and they are a partner with the All of Us research program. And the All of Us research program is a program from the National Institutes of Health, and it aims to build one of the largest, most diverse collection of data of its kind for health research. The goal is to have 1 million or more diverse volunteers nationwide who will sign up to share information over time. So like your biological information. The goal of the program is to help researchers understand more about why people get sick or stay healthy. By looking at patterns, researchers may learn more about what affects people's health. So it's a large research project on precision medicine. The All of Us research program will be a resource for many different medical studies and is a cornerstone of the Precision Medicine Initiative. To learn more about All of Us, you can visit joinallofus.org /NLM, and that's another website that I'll share with you. My son is trying to press the screen like it's touch screen. You all can't see him, but you may hear him. And next, a lot of the nutrition information and health information that we integrate into our program, we gather from a website called Medline Plus. And it's similar to, I know that people are familiar with like WebMD, so it's similar in that way, as they're both an online health information resource for people, patients, and their families and friends. And this is also a resource from the National Library of Medicine. And we have been like really impressed with the depth of resources and the different types of resources that are available here. So there are formal like research studies, and there are informal things like newsletters that have valuable health information. Some topics that Medline Plus has includes health topics on health issues such as asthma, cancer, diabetes, different drug and supplement information. There's videos, easy to read health information, and it's available in over 45 different languages. And what I find to be most important as I spend a lot of time researching on the internet is there are no advertisements or endorsements. So this is health information, and it is not, it's not buried amongst like all these different pop-up ads. So we find it to be a really good resource, and we like to share that with you as well. And the survey that I share, that also is a survey that will help continue to contribute to our support and the support of our programs from our funders. So if you enjoyed our program today, we really would ask and encourage you to complete the survey so we can continue to provide free programming like this for you and others who may be interested.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we'll do the survey. Thank you. Thank you for putting this on.
Yes, we just want to say thank you for everyone who participated with us today. Like, we're always happy to see new faces and hear feedback from you guys. So again, if you could fill out that survey, we would really, really appreciate it. And just thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. We hope that you gained a lot of information and hopefully you learned something new today as well.
Thank you.
Thank
Would
you.
you send all the things to email to us? Yeah.
Yes, and we'll be sharing that recipe for the purple dead nettle soup that we mentioned. We're actually going to be sharing that on our Instagram account right after class.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah, so mentioning our Instagram, you know, follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Black Girls with Green Thumbs. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye. Thanks again. Have a great
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.